You've been thinking about starting something for weeks. Not because you don't have time, not because you don't know what to do, because every time you sit down to begin, you can already feel the gap between what you want to produce and what you're actually going to produce. And that gap is enough to stop you before you've written a single word. Most people assume perfectionism is about high standards, about caring, about not being willing to settle for work that's merely okay. That's what perfectionism says about itself. The research tells a more interesting story. By the end of this, you're going to understand why perfectionism produces less, not more, and why the one thing that actually works is almost the opposite of what perfectionists try. The question isn't why people want to be perfect. The question is what they're trying to protect themselves from. And the answer changes everything. There are actually two different things that get called perfectionism, and they work in opposite directions. The first is adaptive perfectionism. High standards, a genuine drive toward quality, satisfaction when you get something right. This kind is associated with better outcomes. It's what drives people who keep improving across their whole lives. The second kind isn't like that at all. It isn't about wanting to do well. It's about needing to avoid doing badly. The standards aren't there because you love quality. They're there because falling short of them would feel like proof that you're not enough. Not that the work isn't good enough, that you aren't. That's the kind this video is about. Two things that look identical from the outside. One is a drive towards something. The other is a retreat from something. That's the whole difference. Picture this. Someone sits down to write the first paragraph of a project they've been thinking about for weeks. They type a sentence. They read it back. Delete it. Type a slightly different version. Read it. Delete that too. 20 minutes in, the page is still blank, and they've stopped thinking about the project. They're thinking about whether they're actually the kind of person who can do this. They close the laptop. They'll start tomorrow, when conditions are better. Tomorrow, the same thing. This isn't writer's block. It isn't distraction, and it isn't laziness. It's the gap between the standard and the current moment, and the specific feeling that lives in that gap. That feeling, the quiet internal verdict that says, not yet, not good enough, is what maladaptive perfectionism is actually managing. Not quality, the feeling. At the center of this is a belief most perfectionists have been carrying so long they've stopped noticing it. Your worth depends on your performance. Not that you want to do good work, that you are your work. That a flaw in what you produce is a flaw in you. When that belief is running in the background, every piece of work becomes a test. Not of the task, of you. And when every output is a potential verdict on your worth, the safest option is sometimes not to produce an output at all. No result, no verdict. And the person who cares most about quality ends up producing the least. Psychology has a name for this: contingent self-worth. The sense that a person's value is earned rather than given, conditional on what they achieve. It tends to develop early. A child who learns that the gold star produces warmth and the average result produces disappointment doesn't just want to perform well. Over time, they come to believe that performing well is what they are. Not something they do, something they are. That belief doesn't stay in childhood. Here's what makes it hard to recognize. It looks like drive. It looks like caring. What's actually happening is that they're running from a feeling, not moving toward a goal. Goals have endpoints. A feeling you're running from doesn't. Here's the finding that surprises people most. Perfectionists procrastinate significantly more than non-perfectionists. Not in spite of their standards, because of them. Research has consistently found that fear-driven perfectionism is one of the strongest predictors of procrastination. The mechanism is simple. If every piece of work is a test of your worth, beginning the test is genuinely frightening. So you don't begin. The imagined version keeps improving in your head, while the actual version stays unwritten. They don't finish the first draft. They don't send the pitch. They don't show up for the audition. The thing they care about most is often the thing they touch the least. That isn't laziness. It's a rational response to a situation where starting feels more dangerous than not starting. The second finding is harder to absorb. A meta-analysis of over 400 studies found that the concern-based type of perfectionism has significant correlations with anxiety, depression, and OCD symptoms. Perfectionism isn't a trait that makes you successful, but difficult to live with. It's a trait that makes clinical depression significantly more likely. The third finding involves something that's changed in just the last generation. A study that tracked over 40,000 college students from 1989 to 2016 found that socially prescribed perfectionism, the belief that other people require you to be perfect, rose by 33% over that period. Perfectionism isn't just a personal trait, it's something the environment has been actively producing. The fourth finding is the one that makes perfectionism's central promise look weakest. Research has consistently found that people who practice self-compassion, treating themselves after a failure the way they'd treat a good friend, don't perform worse than perfectionists. They perform better. Not because they've lowered their standards, because they can fail and try again. The perfectionist can't start. The self-compassionate person can finish. In everyday life, perfectionism shows up as things that don't announce themselves as perfectionism. It's the person who takes on everything themselves because delegating means watching someone do it wrong. The one with more unfinished projects than finished ones. The one who rewrites the email 12 times and sends it still feeling uneasy. The one who's perpetually one more course, one more qualification away from feeling ready to begin. It shows up in how mistakes land, not as information, as verdicts. That's why criticism hits differently for someone with this pattern. Most people hear feedback on the work. The perfectionist hears a judgment on them. Which is why the usual response isn't curiosity, it's closer to withdrawal. It also shows up in how much they let other people see. The perfectionist is often the person who appears most together because being seen struggling feels genuinely exposing. The uncertainty, the unfinished things, the parts that aren't working, stay private, which makes the whole pattern lonelier and harder to shift. Here's what the framing of perfectionism as high standards tends to miss. It isn't a personality trait. It's a protection strategy. Something that developed, usually early on, to manage the specific feeling that arises when your worth feels conditional on what you do. And like most strategies built early, it works, for a while, at a cost. The cost is that it also keeps you away from the one experience that would change things, doing something badly, finding out you survived it, learning something from the failure, and discovering that the gap between what you produced and what you wanted to produce isn't the same thing as a verdict on who you are. The research keeps arriving at the same conclusion. The people who produce more, achieve more, and feel better doing it aren't the ones with zero tolerance for imperfection. They're the ones who found a way to tolerate it.